question of defining that which we do not know may be a deceptively hard question. That which we do not know as a human species may be defined as simply that information which exceeds the bounds of our semantically apprehensible categories of knowledge. Although it stands to reason that science does not currently hold all the phenomena of the universe in its understanding, science does provide the current best methodology for reasonably ascertaining physical limits of the application of our understanding in the world. We may use science in this vein to flesh out the true technical potential we hold as a species. In other words, define the limits of our physical self-expression as a global civilization. The scientific methodology can even be used to determine the layout of city systems in a global resource-based context. Automated product manufacturing systems may, for instance, be networked via supercomputing systems, so that each facility knows about every other, allowing them to perform highly accurate automated calculations to achieve a socially and ecologically optimal solution. It is becoming clear to increasing numbers of people that we do not currently live in a society which is true to the limits of our collective scientific capacities. Indeed, it is hard not to be aware of the litany of concomitant ecological disasters being caused and exacerbated by human beings operating within our global monetary system. Be this as it may, the human species is in theory capable of far more globally beneficial methods of resource distribution and social organization than can happen under market capitalism economies. According to current science, we could realistically construct and maintain a humane, ecologically balanced society, which could feed, clothe, shelter, and educate every human being on Earth without the need for symbol-based monetary systems. If we were to scientifically assess the available range of ecologically sustainable civilization paradigms on this planet in this solar system, our range of potential civilization paradigms could be analyzed and synthesized for best fit solutions to our current social and environmental needs. We may in fact have a large degree of freedom in choosing what this next generation's society may look like. It is highly probable that discrete regions of culturally unique city systems could be networked non-linearly on a global level without overt sociological consequence to one another, if so desired. The dissolution of cultural form need only reach the level of steady-state stability within the context of our available resource levels and their respective renewal rates. Although abstract, this train of thought is useful in considering the actually existing bounds of our civilizational capacity. Martin Luther King said at SCLC in 1967, "Communism forgets that life is individual. Capitalism forgets that life is social, and the kingdom of brotherhood is found neither in the thesis of communism nor the antithesis of capitalism, but in a higher synthesis." A higher synthesis is scientifically possible, and it is itself like a transcendental equation, subject to a never-ending causal string of non-algebraic definitions. Why allow resource distribution issues to be subject to the unpredictable, hostile methods of free market economies, when it is possible to simply disavow financial uncertainty and life insecurity their technologically unnecessary places in the lives of billions? This could be done through the application of non-hostile scientific reasoning if the world's people comprehended a shared context of friendly strength and mutual reliance on an Earth or planetary level. It may seem unlikely that such an outcome could be reached, and yet many dozens of countries are quite technologically advanced right now. Many dozens have started a diverse range of open access movements. Singapore, for instance, provides free Wi-Fi to everyone within its limits, with only very simple terms and conditions. Tragic is the fact that it is practically a tired cliché to say ending war could feed all the poor of the earth. We need not limit the range of our humanitarian activities to philanthropy and volunteerism. Humanitarian activities could be made an integral aspect of a global resource-based economy. When looking at the life-sustaining processes on Earth, one may notice that biological emergence does not itself operate within the bounds of monetary economic systems. As human beings are biological organisms and are empirically connected and supported by simultaneous biological processes such as forests and ecosystems, it is clear that human civilization itself will continue to be at odds with monetary ideologies entirely removed from the actually occurring processes of nature. Biology is considered by many to be a kind of gray science, alluding to the fact that hard rules or laws in nature rarely lend themselves well to the test of time. This, of course, does not at all discount the validity of the scientific method in reasoning about and coming to understand nature, even if biological emergence exceeds current understanding in some part. Science allows us the capacity to illustrate and describe life processes which have historically gone on without known physical reference. Science does this through an applied methodology of self-criticism and corrective methodological reconfiguration based upon newly observed natural phenomena. This ongoing analytic process is what allows the scientific method to realize objectively deeper and more accurate models in general of the natural world. If life were totally the product of Newtonian or even Hamiltonian procedures, life then would be the brainchild of neurosemantic interconnectedness, expressed through the first-order predicate symbolic logic of a handful of priestly technologists living during the Holocene epoch. It seems to be model theism that drives compulsive fundamentalists of all bandwidths to hone their ontological modes to come tangential with all others. Science seems to be a series of first-order logical predications enunciated by linguistic concepts with movable syntax. Science seems to be building the artificial mind of a new organism, collecting massive negentropy into an immolating informational phoenix. This organization of high energies into causal semantic systems like global supercomputing systems, massively parallel processing, and solar system-wide technological feedback networks has caused a direct confrontation of entropy with negentropy, or habit with novelty, or memory with chaos. All of these illustrative linguistic dichotomies characterize interaction as a cognitively beheld essence, the foundation of our perception of organizing emergence in nature. Where I would like to go is beyond the territory of instinctual solar systemic familiarity, the place where a trans-ontological hypermatrix of diffuse intention replaces our fabric of reality. This may be called the conscious perception of trans-ontology, a mode of thinking displaced from causality and matter into formative causation and creative nonlinear dynamics. This phenomenon appears globally as the art, architecture, aesthetics, and performative expressions of once isolated cultures become innervated by cultural diffusion and assimilation.
Cultures fight and fuse together to ultimately reach an organosynthetic, biomimetic, transmodern, transpersonal, post-war, post-hate, holistic cultural integrationism, unifying disparate categories as great art always does. It does seem the ever more exotic juxtaposition of disparate cultural elements, a simulacron of complex, compounded intellectual concrescences, an aesthetic godhead before only prophesied through the mentation of spiritual masters. We seem to be becoming an aesthetic distillation of Eastern Taoism and Shintoism, the transpersonal and irrational literalizations of Dadaism and Surrealism, the post-industrial aspects of modernism and postmodernism, the spiritual influences of East Indian polytheism, Hinduism, and the early introspective shamanism of China, all the disparate, pre-literate, earth-loving communities of tribal Africa, South America, and Australia, the dynamic, the historical, the agrarian, and the contemporary metal and brick structuralism of Switzerland, Finland, Sweden, Norway, Poland, Germany, and the UK, the emotionally charged expressionistic humanism of Spanish, Italian, and French post-Renaissance art, the intricate geometric beauty of Middle Eastern and Moroccan architecture, and the space-bound, transhuman holographic aesthetic that defines visual expressions of the future. In condensed terms, all self-contained culture is being obliterated by exposure to the radiation of unlimited information. Could we not eventually burst into a triumphant dimension of telepathic collectivity? Is it not astonishing to realize over and over again that so many millions of human beings feel attracted to these uncharted waters? Billions of human beings share the same bodily, architectonic attributes, and billions of human beings contend with some question of bodily transcendence. We are so similar that it defies reason. We are also so unusual that it begs question. It seems to me good, true, and beautiful to acknowledge that nature attempts not ideology, but art in every moment of being. I capitalize this word nature when I write to denote the huge scale of the situation. Nature is, of course, organisms and ecosystems. It is galactic objects like stars, nebulas, galaxies of all types, plasma gas clouds, high-energy polar matter ejection from stars, black holes, geological processes, and the organisms and ecosystems which emerge on certain planets. To me, nature is the place where all dreams exist, where all cells divide, where all time occurs. Nature is neither static nor mute. Nature is not given to dualism. Nature does not yield to stupidity. Nature does not stop its complexification through ever redefining mass speciations. Nature is that ultimate, intoxicated, goddess-like intelligence, unyielding to the thermodynamic pull of entropy. Nature seems to be the emergence of self-reflexive cosmic intent, radiation penetrating a mysterious plenum of solid matter at lower and less chaotic energy states than existed in the very early universe. Every moment, change happens faster than it did the moment before. In other words, more happens in a given amount of time than in a comparable reference frame in the past. The universe has had this tendency to increase in complexity, or undergo complexification, as far back into the past as we can know. The human being, in its attempt to emulate the biological process, to scale the evolutionary call for abundance, is all but arrogant. It is becoming. It is in emergent behavior that nature expresses itself most uniquely. Many processes in nature have the quality of spontaneously emerging out of systems of less information. In other words, natural material, chemical, mineral, geologic, etc. systems have consistently, for 3 billion years or longer, overcome an informational and entropic barrier that is highly mysterious, even to modern science. Nature may now be seen as a creative force expressing itself by ecosystemic creation, acting as the primary translator of matter into living temporal objects or organisms. Entertaining the image of the human being as time-binding in the Krzyzewskian sense, emergent awareness allows a wider and steeper intellectual hill to summit than is allowed for by dualism. In fact, as we look at progressively large-scale global processes happening in the intersubjectively verifiable dimensions of experience, we notice an interesting trend towards not intellectual closure, but awestruck amazement and even hierophany. As our understanding of reality grows greater, the frontier of our ignorance grows even faster than that. This makes sense, as the universe is, of course, the sum collection of all being. It is indeed the furthest extension of perception of anything that we have, the extension which yields that the distance is too far to go. Like the Kola super-deep borehole, as we drill further down to reach that nougat of ultimate informational density of understanding, we find that our drill, our cognitive apparatus as it were, is insufficient to the task. Distinguished cognitive scientist Benny Shannon authored a work titled The Antipodes of the Mind, charting the phenomenology of the ayahuasca experience, for which he courageously dedicated years of his life to working with, cataloging, analyzing, and attempting to draw conclusions from immersion in the classical ayahuasca practices of South America. Before becoming a student of ayahuasca, primarily with the Santo Daime Church, Shannon was already a highly accomplished academic phenomenologist with ontological views similar to the pantheism commonly attributed to Spinoza. Shannon goes to the unique length of not only participating in ayahuasca, but cataloging and attempting a cross-cultural comparison of the visions in the ayahuasca experience from about 2,500 individual accountings. However, despite Shannon's unambiguously rigorous scholarly background and major contributions to the philosophical and cognitive scientific literature, he ultimately admits to finding things even firsthand that defied all of his ideological categories. As he said on page 356 in The Antipodes of the Mind, very poignantly, I realized how limited the scientific approach is. It was evident to me that in pursuing this stance, there are realms of knowledge that can never be attained. I further comprehended that there are levels of knowledge that demand one to let go and relinquish all critical, distanced analysis. In this respect, despite all its limitations in terms of sociological power and cultural permanence, the indigenous stance has the upper hand. Alluding to full identification with the transcendent other, the ultimate good, Shannon writes, "There is no clear-cut differentiation between interpretation and creation. In essence, all is interpretive, all is creative." It is incredibly intriguing to find oneself in a universe of constant self-transcending creativity, and probably quite healthy to admit to that when it is noticed. Some of us, like Benny Shannon, embrace a perpetual cresting wave of dynamic change in our world. We belong to a kind of imaginal process of multi-level intelligence undergoing transfinite, irreducible explosions into higher levels of sophistication and complexity. The only factor really standing in the way between ourselves and conscious machines is the synthesis of our neurobiology with an effective informational interface to the internet. We have already entered into the proto-telepathic portion of technological evolution, wherein language as a process of self-discovery expresses itself at higher and higher bandwidth. First, spoken language, then pictographics, then writing with imagination, then mathematics, then radio, then the internet. In this process of self-escalating jumps into higher levels of technological sophistication and complexity, what will become of the internet? When we take Moore's law, describing the evolution of technology, against the evolution of the universe as physics know it, we can draw a very simple comparison between the two. Both of them, note, display an exponential complexification on vastly different scales. The universe exponentially increases in complexity. Technology, as we know it so far, has exponentially increased in speed and capacity. Note how this phenomena of self-similar emergence occurs in different scales, time and space. This self-similar emergence could be said to be polymodal, like in polymodal chromaticism in music. Total informational transfer amongst humankind has increased dramatically in the last 300 years, and there are many signs that it will continue to do so well into the future. This is called accelerating change. Humanity seems compelled by the force of intelligence to transcend all previous forms of limitation. This is our quintessential art form, our self-expression. Why else would we possess such an enormous capacity to emote? From emotions are born world governments, cults, social icons, demons, angels, expressionistic art, and often even technology. It seems we must emotionally, as well as intellectually, understand the ever-increasing extrapolation of our intelligence into the space of realized potentiality. It is this ability to wring mineral matter through a mental process of informational condensation to produce technological objects that largely differentiates us from the rest of the animal kingdom. It does not seem impossible then, if taken at a large enough time scale, that we might actually transition from flesh to spirit by making our own matter semantically organized in digital and quantum circuitry. For the last 4,500 years or so, we have attempted to become a kind of hyperorganism, a largely print-created democratic animal. The extent to which the historical process of civilization has affected our psychologies is indubitably dramatic. It has brought us to the epigenetic realm of global proto-telepathy as a result of electronically produced media. It has also brought us into a cognitive realm of nearly inescapable mental abstraction, reductionism, mechanism, and contextual limitation due to our constant immersion within the paradigm of written language. As we begin to see the air we breathe, so to speak, we begin to cognize ever greater dimensional contexts. These ever greater dimensional contexts are the rungs of the intellectual ladder we superimpose upon all being.